Growing up in the 80s is much different than growing up nowadays. As a kid, we didn't have a lot of the technologies that are available today. Our entertainment was pretty limited in that regard. Most of the time, we'd spend our days outside riding bikes or walking around neighborhoods with friends. We didn't have the internet or computers. Well, not like how they are today anyways. I didn't even have a personal TV in my room when I was a kid. My family just had one large Zenith television in the living room, and if either my mother or father were using it, that meant we had to watch whatever they were watching. My father usually stuck to sports, which wasn't terrible, but my mother watching her talk shows and soap operas were the absolute worst. Not to mention the fact that there weren't nearly as many channels back then. Due to this, I spent a lot of time alone in my room with my toys. The toys we had to keep us occupied heavily relied on our imaginations. Action figures and stuffed animals mostly. We did have a few other intricate items such as the Speak and Spell and the Rubik's Cube, but those tended to get old fast. I know it probably may seem like I'm coming from the Stone Age, but we did have video game consoles too. Still a relatively new concept during my youth, Nintendo and Atari quickly became hot commodities to purchase for children despite the price tag. I was one of the kids unlucky enough not to get one during my childhood. I came from a low-income family, and even though I begged and pleaded for a Nintendo, the money just wasn't there. That's not to say my parents were against toys or buying me things. It was just only if the budget allowed it, which a lot of times it didn't. When I was 5, I had difficulty sleeping. I had the most crippling fear of the dark you could ever imagine. I would lie awake shaking underneath my blankets, staring at anything and everything that resembled a monster. A pile of clothes, a coat rack, shadows, you name it. My mom tried to quell the fear with nightlights, but those almost seemed to make things worse. The shadows cast off of them seemed to transform into demonic shapes on my walls. Even those didn't last very long anyways, as my father had a bad month at work and came home in a rage. He complained about wasted electricity, and in turn ripped all of the unnecessary plugs out of the outlets, including my nightlights. That Christmas, my mother had saved up some money and bought me a present. When I tore the wrapping paper away, I was greeted with two eyes looking back at me. I almost screamed as I dropped the box. Seeing my fear, my mother took control of the situation. She removed the rest of the paper to reveal a teddy bear, but not just any teddy bear. A Teddy Ruxpin. The magically animated storytelling bear. Even though it wasn't a Nintendo, I was just happy to receive a present at all. My mother told me that Teddy Ruxpin would also help me get to sleep, and would watch over me and keep me safe. This made me feel a lot better. And for many years, even after I grew out of my fear of the dark, I was unable to sleep without listening to him. It's been almost 30 years since then. I've grown up, have my own place, and a nice steady job. My life is, for lack of a better word, normal. My mother had called me a month ago in regards to picking up some of my old things from the house. I had gone over, and even though my mom had neatly packed everything up into boxes for me, I couldn't help myself. I immediately opened up each of the boxes, and with every one I opened, the nostalgia trip grew. Most of the old boxes were filled with clothes, but then I opened the ones containing my old toys. There, buried under G.I. Joes and a couple of board games, was that familiar face. I pulled him out and held him for a moment. All his stories rushed back to me, and I couldn't help but smile. My mom told me she was unable to find the books to go along with it, but did manage to save a couple of his cassette tapes. I packed everything up and took it back to my place. That night, while I was sitting there relaxing and watching the game, I heard something coming from the other room. It sounded like a muffled voice. Confused, I got up and went to investigate. As I got closer, the noise grew louder until I arrived at the collection of boxes. When I did, the voice seemed to stop almost instantly. I opened the boxes thinking that Teddy must have gotten turned on when I was looking at it earlier. I pulled him out and examined him. Sure enough, he was turned on and had one of his tapes loaded in. I removed the tape and switched him off before setting him back in the box. It was about time for bed as I had to be at work early the next morning. So I shut off the TV and made my way to the bedroom. As I did, I happened to pass by the spare room I used mainly for storage. I heard a voice say out loud,
"Hello."
I stopped dead in my tracks and turned to the room. Hesitantly, I walked in and saw Teddy sitting there next to the box. I was sure I had placed him back inside of it, but quickly disregarded it. I picked him back up and double-checked to make sure he was switched off. I once again placed him back in the box, closed it up, and walked out of the room. I was woken up at around 3 a.m. to a strange sound. It sounded like stuff falling. I sat up in my bed waiting to see if the sound would happen again, but it didn't. I'm not sure why, but looking around my dark room at 3 a.m. made me remember the fear I had when I was a kid. Then, I heard a word echo from the other room.
"Hello."
Instantly, I recognized it as Teddy Ruxpin, and assumed the box must have fallen over. I got out of bed and sluggishly walked over to the other room. I had to rub my eyes twice after seeing what I did. The box that Teddy was in was completely torn open. All my toys were strewn about the ground, and at the center, sitting by himself, was Teddy. I walked over to him, taking care not to step on one of the million army men that littered the ground like landmines. I picked him up, and when I did, he spoke.
"Hello. My name is Teddy Ruxpin. How are you today?"
I turned him over and opened his battery compartment. When I went to take out the batteries, he said something else.
"I wouldn't do that if I were you."
I immediately dropped him and backed away. I had never heard him say that before. He lay silently on the ground for a few minutes. Thinking that my tiredness had simply gotten the better of me, I walked over to him and picked him up once again. I went for the batteries once more, and once more he spoke.
"You'll be..."
But as I removed one of the batteries, his voice trailed off. Must have gotten defective with his old age, I thought. I set it next to one of the remaining boxes and decided to clean up the mess when I got home from work the next day. I went back to bed, and not an hour later I was awoken once again. This time I could have sworn something had touched my face while I was asleep. I opened my eyes and sat up quickly. I looked around, and that's when I saw him. He was sitting with his back to my closed bedroom door. I could feel a strange tension in the air as I stared at him wide-eyed. His robotic eyes glistened in the darkness as they moved. Watching it stare at me from the floor ignited a fear long forgotten. I don't know why, but I found myself saying, "Hello?" even though I know I didn't want to reply.
"Hello, Michael. I'm Teddy Ruxpin. Remember?"
I felt my throat swell up as I stared at him. "Yes, I remember."
"Why did you leave, Michael? I thought we were friends."
"We are friends," I said. I couldn't believe I was actually having a conversation with a stuffed animal. "What do you want, Teddy?"
"To show you."
Show me what? I replied.
To show you what it's like to be left scared and alone.
I'm not sure what came over me, but I jumped out of my bed and grabbed Teddy as hard as I could. I took him outside into my backyard and doused him in gasoline. All the while, he kept repeating,
I won't die. I won't die. I won't die.
I struck a match and set him ablaze. The smell of cotton and plastic burning filled the night air. The whirring of animatronics creaked and groaned. Through the crackling fire, Teddy spoke one last time.
You will know what it's like to be left.
I threw his remains in the trash can and sat up the rest of the night drinking. I called in sick from work the next day, and I tried to chalk the whole thing up as one messed up nightmare. However, something happened yesterday, and this is the reason I am writing this out. I had just gotten home from work, and as I was unlocking my front door, I happened to look down and notice something sitting on my welcome mat. It was one of Teddy Ruxpin's old tapes. I know this all sounds far-fetched, but I don't think Teddy Ruxpin is gone. I think he's just waiting to come back when I least expect him.